From Pain to Purpose. Chapter 1. The Shattered Heart. Claire had always considered herself a creator, someone who saw the world through a lens of beauty and expression. She had spent years curating a life with Liam that seemed to mirror this same aesthetic: polished, purposeful, and picture-perfect. Their home was a blend of art and comfort, a sanctuary where they hosted friends for elegant dinner parties and celebrated anniversaries with lavish vacations. On the outside, everything about their life together sparkled with success. But beneath the shine, Claire could sense the cracks forming. Liam had become distant over the past year, his once warm presence turning cool and disconnected. She noticed the small changes at first: his quick glances at his phone when he thought she wasn't looking, the way he stayed at the office later and later, the hollow sound of his laughter that no longer seemed to reach his eyes. Claire tried to rationalize it away, chalking it up to the stresses of his job, a demanding corporate career that often left him drained. She convinced herself that this was just a phase, that marriages had their ups and downs. But the gnawing feeling in her gut wouldn't subside, and over time, it became harder to ignore. The growing distance between them was like a shadow that loomed over their everyday moments, turning even the most mundane tasks, like cooking dinner together, into something heavy with unspoken tension. It wasn't until that fateful evening, when Liam's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower, that Claire's suspicions took on a tangible form. She didn't mean to look. She didn't want to. But something inside her, perhaps the part that had felt the fracture in their marriage long before her mind was willing to admit it, compelled her to pick it up. A message from a number she didn't recognize blinked on the screen, innocuous at first glance. But as Claire scrolled, her heart began to race. The words were intimate, far too familiar. Her breath caught in her throat as she read through the string of texts, each one more damning than the last. "Last night was incredible," one message read. Another, "Can't wait to see you again." Her vision blurred with unshed tears as the truth came crashing down around her. It was as though time stood still in that moment, her heart pounding in her chest, her fingers shaking as she clutched the phone. She had always imagined that if she ever faced this kind of betrayal, she would scream, cry, maybe even throw something. But in that moment, Claire felt only a hollow numbness. The sound of the shower turning off snapped her out of her trance. She quickly placed the phone back on the counter, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. Liam emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, oblivious to the emotional storm that had just erupted inside her. He smiled at her, that same smile she had once fallen in love with, but now it felt like a cruel facade. Claire didn't confront him that night. She couldn't. She sat in silence, her mind racing, trying to process what she had just discovered. When Liam kissed her goodnight and crawled into bed beside her, she turned away, staring at the ceiling as the tears finally spilled over. She didn't sleep at all, her body tense and rigid as the weight of his betrayal pressed down on her like a suffocating blanket. The next morning, the numbness gave way to a torrent of emotions. Her mind was a chaotic swirl of anger, hurt, and disbelief. How could this have happened? How could Liam, the man she had loved and trusted for so many years, betray her like this? She wanted answers, but more than that, she wanted to rewind time. To go back to the days when their love had felt pure and unbreakable. When Liam returned from work that evening, Claire was waiting for him in the living room. She hadn't planned what to say, but the words spilled out of her anyway. Slowly at first, then faster as her emotions overtook her. She told him she knew, that she had seen the messages, that there was no point in hiding it anymore. Liam didn't deny it. He didn't even try to explain at first, and the lack of resistance was almost more painful than the betrayal itself. His silence was a confirmation, a final nail in the coffin of the life they had built together. Eventually, he admitted it. He had been seeing someone else for the past few months. He claimed it didn't mean anything, that it had just been a mistake. But Claire could hear the emptiness in his words. This wasn't the first time he had been unfaithful. She could see it in his eyes, the way he couldn't meet her gaze. This was just the first time he had been caught. And now that the truth was out, there was no going back. In that moment, Claire realized that her heart was well and truly shattered. The life she thought she knew, The marriage she had worked so hard to nurture was built on a foundation of lies. But amidst the devastation, there was also a strange sense of clarity. This was her breaking point, but it would not be her end. The rest of the night passed in a blur. She barely remembered the details of their conversation, the words they exchanged. What she did remember was the cold, hollow feeling that settled deep in her chest, a numbness that wrapped around her like armor, protecting her from the full weight of the pain. After Liam left the house the next morning, Claire found herself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red from crying. She felt small, fragile, like she might break at any moment. But there was also something else in her reflection, a flicker of strength she hadn't realized was there. How had it come to this? How had she let herself become so entangled in a relationship that now felt like it had suffocated her for years? The questions weighed heavily on her mind, swirling around like a storm with no answers. The pain was overwhelming, but Claire knew one thing for sure. She couldn't let it consume her. She needed to find a way to process what had happened, to release the emotions that were building up inside her like a pressure cooker. And for her, that had always meant one thing: creation. Without fully knowing why, Claire opened her laptop and began to type. Her fingers moved almost of their own accord, the words flowing out of her in a torrent. She wrote about the betrayal, about the heartbreak, about the numbness that had settled over her like a cloud. It was raw, unfiltered, unpolished, but it was real. She didn't think about who would read it or what they might think. In that moment, it didn't matter. This was for her, a way to make sense of the chaos in her mind. She typed for hours, pouring her soul onto the screen, letting the emotions she had been holding back for so long finally spill out. When she finally stopped, her hands aching from the hours of writing, she sat back and read through what she had written. It was messy, disjointed, but it was honest. For the first time since discovering Liam's infidelity, she felt a small sense of relief, as though the weight on her chest had lifted just slightly. Claire had always been a creator, but she never imagined that her greatest masterpiece would come from the depths of her heartbreak. This was just the beginning. Chapter 2. Finding Her Voice. The morning after Claire poured her heart out on her blog, she felt an odd sense of peace. It wasn't a cure for the pain, but it was the first time in days she didn't feel overwhelmed by it. Her blog, which she named From Pain to Purpose, was initially a private refuge, a digital space where she could unravel the tangled emotions she couldn't express out loud. It was her sanctuary, a place where her thoughts could flow freely without the pressure of being judged or understood by anyone else. She hadn't told anyone about the blog. It wasn't meant to be read by anyone else, at least not at first. It was more like a diary, the words raw and unpolished. Each post was an outpouring of her grief, a way for her to release the flood of emotions that constantly threatened to drown her. She wrote about the slow disintegration of her marriage, the love that had faded without her realizing it, and the moment her world came crashing down when she discovered Liam's infidelity. The posts came in waves, each one cathartic in its own way. Some days, the words came easily, flowing out of her like a stream. Other days, she struggled to even open the laptop, the pain too fresh, too real. But she forced herself to write anyway, knowing that if she didn't, the grief would sit heavy in her chest, suffocating her. Weeks passed, and her blog remained her secret. She didn't even track whether anyone else was reading it. That wasn't the point. From Pain to Purpose wasn't about finding an audience. It was about finding herself again. But one morning, when she logged into her account to write another post, she noticed something different. There was a comment. At first, Claire's heart raced. She had forgotten that her posts were public, that others could stumble upon them. The thought of someone reading her innermost thoughts made her stomach churn with anxiety. But curiosity got the better of her, and she clicked on the notification. "Your story resonates with me so much. Thank you for sharing. I'm going through something similar, and reading this made me feel less alone." The simple comment felt like a lifeline, a connection to someone who understood. For the first time since her world had fallen apart, Claire felt seen. The knowledge that her words had resonated with someone else, a stranger, no less, was both humbling and empowering. Her pain wasn't just hers to carry anymore. It had become a bridge, linking her to others who had experienced the same heartache, the same betrayal. As the days passed, more comments began to trickle in. Some were brief messages of support, others were longer stories shared by women who had walked the same path. They wrote about the husbands who had betrayed them, the marriages that had crumbled, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding their lives. Claire found herself drawn into their stories, reading each one with a sense of shared empathy. She wasn't the only one suffering, and that knowledge gave her a strange sense of comfort. What started as a personal diary slowly transformed into something bigger. Her blog, once just a quiet corner of the internet, began to gain traction. More readers found their way to From Pain to Purpose, leaving comments of gratitude, solidarity, and shared pain. Claire realized that her story wasn't unique, that her heartbreak was a universal experience felt by so many others. With each post, Claire found herself healing just a little more. Writing had always been a way for her to process her thoughts, but now it felt like something deeper. Each story she shared, each memory she unearthed, was a way of reclaiming her narrative. She was no longer just a victim of Liam's betrayal. She was a survivor, finding strength in her vulnerability. She wrote about the good times, too. About the early days of her relationship with Liam, when everything had felt magical and full of promise. She wrote about the moments that made her heart soar, the laughter they had shared, and the dreams they had built together. But she didn't shy away from the bad times either. She chronicled the slow unraveling of their marriage, the moments when she had felt him slipping away, and the sharp pain of realizing she had been living in a lie. The more Claire wrote, the more she realized that her blog wasn't just about her heartbreak. It was about finding her voice again. Liam had taken so much from her. Her trust, her sense of security, her belief in the future they had planned together. But what he hadn't taken was her ability to create, to express herself through words. Writing became her form of therapy, and with every post, she felt a little stronger. Soon, her blog posts began to take on a new tone. What started as raw, emotional outpourings of grief gradually shifted into something more reflective, more introspective. Claire began to explore not just the pain of her past, but the lessons she was learning from it. She wrote about healing, about the small victories she found in her day-to-day life, and about the slow process of rediscovering who she was outside of her marriage to Liam. One post, titled A Love Lost, But Not Myself, became particularly popular. In it, Claire wrote about the realization that her identity had become so intertwined with Liam's that she had forgotten who she was without him. The post struck a chord with her readers, and comments poured in from women who had experienced the same thing. The slow erosion of self that happens when you lose yourself in a relationship. You've put into words what I've been feeling for years, one commenter wrote. Thank you for reminding me that I'm still here, even after everything I've been through. Another comment read, I didn't know how much I needed to read this until I did. Your story is helping me heal too. As Claire read through the comments, a realization dawned on her. From Pain to Purpose had started as a way for her to cope with her own heartbreak, but it had evolved into something much larger. It had become a space of connection and healing for others, too. A community of women who were navigating the same emotional landscape and finding strength in each other's stories. Claire's heart swelled with gratitude. She had spent so long feeling isolated in her pain, but now she realized she wasn't alone. Her voice mattered, her story mattered, and in sharing it, she was helping others heal alongside her. She wasn't just writing for herself anymore. She was writing for all of them. With each new post, Claire felt herself moving forward, bit by bit. Her pain was still there, but it no longer consumed her. It had become the fuel for something greater, something meaningful. She was finding her purpose in the midst of her heartbreak, and in doing so, she was transforming her life in ways she had never imagined. Writing had given Claire a way to reclaim her narrative, but more than that, it had given her a sense of agency. She wasn't a passive victim of Liam's betrayal. She was an active participant in her own healing. And through her words, she was helping others do the same. As her blog continued to grow, Claire began to think about the future. What else could she do with this platform she had built? How could she continue to use her voice to inspire and uplift others? These were questions she didn't yet have answers to, but for the first time in a long time, Claire felt hopeful. She had found her voice, and she wasn't going to let it be silenced ever again. Chapter 3. Turning Pain into Art. As the days turned into weeks, Claire found herself engulfed in a whirlwind of creativity. The blog had become her catharsis, a way to express her raw emotions, but she craved another outlet, something tactile, something that would allow her to translate her heartache into vibrant visuals. It was during one of her reflective mornings, surrounded by the remnants of her unfinished paintings, that Claire decided to pick up her brushes once more. Art had always been a passion of hers, a solace during times of stress. In college, she had majored in fine arts, dedicating herself to the study of colors, forms, and expressions. But as life became busier, first with her demanding job and then with her marriage, her brushes had gathered dust. Now, however, they felt like long-lost friends, inviting her back to a world where she could create freely. In her home studio, which she had transformed from a forgotten corner of her living room into a colorful haven, Claire began to experiment with abstract pieces. The canvas became a space for her emotions to spill out, where each brushstroke represented a fragment of her tumultuous heart. She chose bold colors, deep blues to convey her sadness, fiery reds to express her anger, and soft yellows for the moments of clarity and hope that occasionally pierced through the fog of despair. The act of painting became a physical release, a way to channel the chaos inside her into something beautiful. One afternoon, as she mixed vibrant hues on her palette, Claire felt a rush of inspiration. She wanted to encapsulate the moment of betrayal, that sharp twist in her gut when she discovered Liam's infidelity. The painting came alive under her hands, the colors swirling and clashing in a chaotic dance. It was an explosion of feelings, a representation of her heart shattering and then slowly piecing itself back together. With every layer of paint, she could feel the heaviness of her pain begin to lift, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and clarity. As she continued to create, Claire shared her journey with her readers, posting images of her paintings alongside her blog entries. Each artwork was accompanied by a story, a reflection on the emotions that had inspired it. The response was overwhelming. Her followers resonated with both her words and her art. They saw themselves in her pieces, the turmoil, the despair, and ultimately, the hope and healing. Her social media accounts transformed into galleries of both her written and visual art, where followers engaged in conversations about their own experiences of love, loss, and recovery. People started reaching out, sharing how her work had impacted them, how they felt seen and understood through her expressions. For Claire, it was a reminder that she wasn't alone. Her pain had connected her to a community of survivors. Then came the unexpected email that would change everything. "Dear Claire," it began, "we have been following your blog and your art for some time now, and we believe your work deserves to be seen by a wider audience. We would like to invite you to showcase your paintings at our upcoming local exhibit." As she read the words, her heart raced. A gallery wanted to feature her art? She could hardly believe it. The invitation felt monumental, a validation of her journey from heartbreak to healing. It wasn't just an opportunity to showcase her work. It was a chance to share her story on a larger scale, to connect with others through her art in a way she had only dreamed of. Claire accepted the invitation with an exhilarated heart. The weeks leading up to the exhibit were filled with a flurry of activity. She worked tirelessly in her studio, creating a series of paintings that reflected her journey. Each piece told a story of pain, resilience, and ultimately, hope. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just creating for herself anymore. She was creating for all the women who had felt the weight of betrayal, for those still struggling to find their voice. With the exhibit date looming, Claire decided to host a small gathering at her home for friends and family to preview her work. She wanted to share the journey she had been on, to let them see the art that had come from her heart. As she prepared, she hung the paintings on the walls, transforming her living room into an intimate gallery. The pieces were vibrant and powerful, each one a testament to her healing process. When the night arrived, Claire felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Friends and family began to trickle in, and as they moved through her makeshift gallery, their reactions warmed her heart. They admired the colors, the emotion, the stories behind each piece. She stood by, sharing snippets of her journey, her voice gaining strength with each word. It felt liberating to talk about her pain openly, to embrace it as a part of her story rather than something to be ashamed of. "Your art is stunning, Claire," one of her friends said, her eyes shining with admiration. "It's incredible how you've turned your pain into something beautiful." The praise filled Claire with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't anticipated. She realized that sharing her art and story was not just for her own healing. It was about inspiring others to find their own voices and express their truths. She felt a sense of community building around her, an understanding that while they all had different stories, they were united in their shared experiences of pain and resilience. As the evening wore on, Claire received an unexpected visit from a woman she had never met before. This woman approached her with tears in her eyes, a look of raw emotion etched across her face. "I found your blog a few weeks ago," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't tell you how much it's helped me. I'm going through a divorce right now, and your art, it gives me hope." Claire felt her heart swell. Here was a stranger, connected by shared experiences, drawing strength from her journey. It was a moment that solidified her purpose. She wasn't just an artist. She was a catalyst for healing, a voice for those who felt lost. By the time the evening came to a close, Claire felt lighter, her heart full. The gathering was a success, and as she reflected on the night, she realized how far she had come. What had started as an expression of pain had blossomed into a celebration of resilience and creativity. The day of the exhibit arrived, and Claire felt a mixture of excitement and nerves fluttering in her stomach. As she stood in front of the gallery, taking in the bright lights and the buzz of anticipation, she couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed in her life. Her art was ready to be unveiled, a collection of her heart laid bare for the world to see. Inside, the gallery buzzed with life. Friends, family, and newcomers mingled, their laughter and conversations creating a symphony of hope. Claire felt a thrill of nervousness as she prepared to step into the space she had envisioned for so long. The walls adorned with her paintings stood as testaments to her journey, each piece echoing the feelings she had once buried deep inside. As the evening progressed, Claire found herself moving from group to group, discussing her art and the stories behind it. Each conversation filled her with warmth and joy, a reminder of the connection her art had forged between her and her audience. She listened to stories of heartache and triumph, realizing that her journey resonated with so many others. And then, at that moment, she spotted Liam standing at the entrance. Time seemed to freeze as she locked eyes with him. The man who had once been her partner, who had shattered her world, was now here, dressed in a suit that felt out of place in this vibrant atmosphere. He looked both surprised and uncertain, as if he had stumbled into a world he no longer belonged to. Claire's heart raced, but this time, it was different. It was a mix of empowerment and reflection. As she approached him, the air felt charged with unspoken words and memories. Claire felt the emotions swirling within her, but instead of anger or resentment, she found clarity. She had transformed, and she was ready to show him just how far she had come. "Liam," she said, her voice steady, "I didn't expect to see you here." He looked at her, the vulnerability in his eyes apparent. "I saw the invitation and I had to come," he said, his voice a soft murmur. "Your work is incredible." "Thank you," Claire replied, her gaze unwavering. "It's been a journey, but I've learned so much about myself in the process." She could see him absorbing her words, the weight of their past hanging heavily in the air between them. But instead of the usual discomfort or anger she once felt, Claire experienced a profound sense of closure. This was a pivotal moment, not just for her, but for him as well. "Claire, he began, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "I know you have things you want to say," she interrupted gently, "but I'd like to invite you to share your own story. I think it would be good for both of us." Liam looked taken aback, his eyes widening in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've had your own journey, too. I think it would be powerful for everyone here to hear about the lessons you've learned, especially about the impact of choices and the importance of honesty." There was a moment of silence as he processed her words. Claire watched as a mix of gratitude and apprehension crossed his face. Just speak from your heart," Claire encouraged. "You might be surprised by how much people resonate with your honesty." As she stood there, she realized that in inviting him to share, she wasn't just offering him a chance to speak. She was also giving herself the gift of letting go of the pain, the resentment, and the anger that had once consumed her. She had transformed her heartbreak into art, and in that moment, she found her purpose. In the following moments, Claire stepped aside, allowing him to address the small gathering. As he spoke, his voice trembled with sincerity. He spoke of his mistakes, his regrets, and the lessons learned through the pain he had caused. It was a moment of humility, one that resonated deeply with everyone present, including Claire. By the end of the night, Claire knew she had not only shared her art but had also created an opportunity for healing, not just for herself, but for Liam and for everyone who had been touched by their story. In that gallery, among the swirling colors and heartfelt words, Claire had turned her pain into purpose, crafting a narrative of resilience and hope that would continue to inspire others on their journeys. Chapter 4. Building a Community. As Claire's art and writing gained popularity, the virtual walls she had built began to dissolve, revealing a thriving community that had formed around her. She no longer felt like a solitary figure pouring her heart into her blog and paintings. She was at the center of a growing network of individuals who had experienced the same heartache and emotional turbulence. Messages flooded in from her readers and followers, individuals eager to share their own stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and healing. Some recounted their own experiences with infidelity, while others expressed gratitude for how Claire's vulnerability had inspired them to confront their pain. Each message reminded Claire of the profound impact her words and creations had on those who resonated with her journey. She realized that her struggles had forged a connection with others who felt lost in their own despair, and together, they formed a tapestry of shared experiences. Recognizing the power of her platform, Claire made the decision to expand her creative outlet. Inspired by the responses she received, she launched a YouTube channel titled From Pain to Purpose. In her first video, Claire sat in front of her camera, a bright smile on her face, her art surrounding her in the background. She spoke directly to her audience, welcoming them into her world, sharing her story of heartbreak and resilience. Her videos soon became a mix of vlogs detailing her daily life, art tutorials guiding viewers through creative exercises, and candid discussions about the lessons she had learned along her path to healing. Each video felt like a heartfelt conversation, and her honesty resonated deeply with viewers. Claire opened up about her fears, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs that had followed her commitment to transformation. Her community grew larger, reaching beyond borders, with people from all over the world reaching out to thank her for her courage and creativity. As her audience flourished, Claire found herself evolving beyond her role as an artist. She embraced her newfound position as a mentor and guide for others, navigating their own journeys. She held online workshops, teaching individuals how to use art as a therapeutic tool for emotional release. Participants would share their struggles in a safe, nurturing environment, and Claire found joy in helping others express their feelings through creativity. Claire also organized virtual support groups where people could come together to share their stories, offering each other comfort and encouragement. It was in these moments that Claire realized she had found her true purpose, helping others heal. By creating a space where vulnerability was welcomed, she could continue to heal herself, alongside her community. Chapter 5. The Art Exhibit. The night of Claire's first solo exhibit arrived, marking a significant milestone in her journey of self-discovery. The gallery was alive with energy, its walls adorned with her paintings, each piece reflecting a different stage of her transformation. The collection served as a visual narrative, illustrating the tumultuous emotions that had accompanied her heartbreak and the eventual emergence of hope and resilience. Dark, chaotic strokes depicted her initial pain, while vibrant, luminous colors conveyed her healing and newfound strength. As Claire walked through the gallery, greeting guests and answering questions about her work, she felt a profound sense of pride wash over her. This was her story, laid bare for the world to see, and she no longer felt ashamed of the pain that had inspired it. Instead, She was grateful for every moment of heartache that had propelled her toward this moment of triumph. Amid the crowd of admirers, Claire's gaze suddenly landed on a familiar face. Liam stood at the entrance of the gallery, his eyes scanning the room, disbelief etched across his features. The man who had once been her partner in life, the man whose betrayal had shattered her world, now looked like a shadow of the person she had known. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't anticipated that she would rise from the ashes of their broken marriage with such strength and grace, forging a life that was not just survivable, but thriving. With a hesitant step, Liam approached her, his expression a mix of regret and admiration. "Claire, I didn't know. I didn't realize how much I hurt you," he said, his voice heavy with remorse. Claire looked into his eyes, her heart steady and calm. In the weeks leading up to the exhibit, she had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times, wondering what she would say if she ever saw him again. Yet, standing in front of him now, she felt no need for revenge, no desire to make him feel her pain. She had moved past that chapter of her life. "You didn't just hurt me, Liam," she replied, her tone composed. "You taught me how to find my strength." Liam looked around at the crowd, at the people who admired her work, who had been touched by her story. "I didn't know you were doing all this," he said, his voice faltering. "I didn't know how much you've grown." Claire smiled softly, her eyes shining with compassion. "You were part of my journey, but you're not the whole story. I've learned to embrace my pain and turn it into something beautiful. I've discovered that I'm capable of so much more than I ever realized." As Liam stood there, processing her words, Claire felt a profound sense of closure wash over her. She had transformed her heartbreak into art, found her voice, and built a community that supported one another. In this moment, she knew that she had not only healed but had also empowered others to do the same. The exhibit continued around them, the laughter and conversations flowing like the colors on her canvases. For Claire, this night was not just about showcasing her art. It was about celebrating her journey and the connections she had forged with those who shared her struggles. As the crowd mingled, Claire turned her attention back to her guests, knowing that her story was only just beginning, and that she would continue to create, inspire, and heal both herself and those who found solace in her work. Chapter 6. Turning the Tables. Instead of walking away, as Claire had always imagined she would in this moment, she did something unexpected. "Why don't you stay for a while?" she asked, her voice gentle yet firm. "I'd like you to see what your actions led to." Liam looked surprised, uncertainty flickering across his features. The last thing he had anticipated upon stepping into the gallery was being invited to stay, to confront the reality of what his actions had wrought. Claire's eyes, filled with a mix of determination and compassion, urged him on. She didn't give him much time to ponder his next move. Taking a deep breath, she guided him through the gallery, weaving between the vibrant canvases that told the story of her transformation. With each painting they stopped to discuss, Claire shared the emotions that had fueled her creativity. She described the chaotic swirls of dark blues and blacks representing her heartbreak, juxtaposed with the fiery oranges and yellows that illustrated her healing. Each stroke had been a cathartic release, a step toward reclaiming her narrative. As they walked, Liam's demeanor shifted. He grew quieter, the weight of his actions becoming increasingly apparent. The vibrant colors that surrounded them stood in stark contrast to the heaviness that had settled in his chest. When they reached the end of the exhibit, Claire paused and turned to him. "I have an idea," she said, her voice soft but firm, the resolve evident in her tone. "I want you to speak. Share your story. Tell these people what happened from your side." Liam's eyes widened in shock. "What? No, I can't." "Yes, you can," Claire replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You owe it to me and to yourself to own up to your mistakes. These people came here to see how I turn my pain into purpose. Now, they need to hear from the person who caused that pain." Liam hesitated, glancing nervously at the crowd that had gathered around them. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but Claire's steady gaze offered no escape. Slowly, he stepped forward, turning to face the crowd. His heart raced, and his voice trembled as he began to speak. "I made mistakes," Liam said, his words slow and measured. as if he were carefully navigating through a minefield of regret. I hurt Claire in ways I didn't fully understand at the time. I thought I was just being selfish, but I realized now that my actions had consequences far beyond what I ever imagined. The room fell silent, the weight of his admission hanging heavily in the air. Claire listened intently, watching as Liam's facade crumbled. He spoke about his infidelity, about how he had taken Claire for granted, and how he had been blind to the damage he was causing. His confession was raw and unpolished, a stark contrast to the carefully crafted pieces of art that surrounded them. I thought I was just looking for something I didn't have, but I didn't realize I was destroying the one thing that truly mattered, Liam continued, his voice faltering slightly. I was so caught up in my own desires that I neglected to see the hurt I was inflicting on the person who loved me most. Claire, I'm sorry for everything I did to you. I can't take it back, but I hope that by sharing this, I can begin to make amends, even if it's only a small step. As he spoke, Claire felt an unexpected calm wash over her. This wasn't about revenge or humiliation. It was about closure for both of them. She understood that his willingness to confront his mistakes was not a means of absolution, but rather a necessary step in acknowledging the pain he had caused. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. When Liam finished speaking, the room erupted in quiet applause. Claire could see the relief on his face. The weight of his guilt lifted, at least in part. He had taken a step toward acknowledging the pain he had caused, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for him, despite everything. But for Claire, this moment wasn't about him. It was about her. She had faced her past head-on, and in doing so, she had taken control of her story. The applause echoed in her ears, a soothing balm to the scars of her past. As she stood there, surrounded by people who had followed her journey from the beginning, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The evening continued, laughter and conversations swirling around her, but Claire felt as if she were floating in her own bubble of serenity. This was her new beginning, a life built not on the pain of the past, but on the strength and creativity she had found within herself. Her art, her words, and her journey had woven together a narrative of resilience that inspired others to confront their own struggles. As the night drew to a close and guests began to filter out of the gallery, Claire caught a glimpse of Liam making his way toward the exit. A mix of emotions surged within her, gratitude for his honesty, sadness for the relationship they had lost, but above all, a sense of empowerment. In that moment, Claire realized that she had finally moved on. She had transformed her pain into purpose, and her journey was complete. With a newfound sense of clarity, she knew she was ready for whatever came next, be it new relationships, fresh challenges, or more art to create. The horizon stretched before her, full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long while, she felt excited about the future.